we're going to be talking about patient recruitment, PI's database, your own private practice of the PI. So regardless of what anyone else ever tells you, there is no better way to get patients than through your own PI. And so this is why finding that PI is so important. So week 1 we discussed how to find a PI. That's why it's week 1. You can't get a study without a PI. And now we're on week 8. There's no way you can get patients without really having a good PI. And so I've started several research clinics throughout my career, and some just kind of happened almost on accident, others were planned. And the best ones, like when you look at a 10-year window, the best ones, the ones that survived, the ones that were able to get through all the cycles, the ups and the downs and everything, were the sites, the clinics that had a private practice built into it. So the PI's private practice built into the clinic itself. So why is this important? Because this is where you're going to get 80% of your patients, okay? All the rest of these slides are going to talk about how to get referrals from physicians, which is the next best, how to deal with support groups in the community, patient advocacy groups. Those are all great. And then one of my favorite strategies is online marketing, right? Those are great, but nothing can replace having a PI recruit from their own private practice. So the first thing you do when you get a study, hopefully before you even start screening, so right after your site selection visit, maybe even before your site selection visit when you're doing the feasibility survey, but months before you actually start screening. That's the whole point of this. Months before you actually start screening, you will go through your PI's private practice database. And depending on what their policy is, so sometimes if you're not a part of the actual private practice, you, even if you're partnered with your PI, don't have access to the PI database. But someone from the PI staff should have access. Usually it's someone who works at the front desk, a receptionist, or one of the medical assistants, or one of the nurse practitioners. Somebody has access, and depending on the PI's private practice policy, you'll be allowed to have direct access to it. You may need to sign a couple things, a couple confidentiality disclosures. You should probably do some training on whatever EMR they're using. Most private practices nowadays use electronic medical records. So I know at 2 of our clinics here in Southern California, one of them, actually both of them, have EMR. They use Practice Fusion, and they have the staff, the research staff, take a training, sign some documents if they're not direct employees of the PI, so that they actually can have access to the PI database. If you work, or if you're partnered with a PI that's part of a larger medical group, you may not be able to do that. You may have to rely on someone from their organization to refer you patients. But regardless of the way you go about it, the end result is what matters. Do you have a database that you can pull from? Do you have patients that you can enroll in the study? And to get patients that are qualified to enroll, remember, studies are getting more complex. So to get patients that are qualified to enroll, you actually need a large number of patients, especially when the studies are getting more complex. So a lot of these studies in the past, they used to be a lot simpler to recruit for. So if you had a database of 15 patients with Alzheimer's, chances are all 15 were to get in. Nowadays, in 2018 and going forward, that same database of 15, and I'm oversimplifying it just to keep the concept simple. Nowadays, that same database of 15, you may only get 2 patients to actually qualify for that study. And this is the case in every indication, not just Alzheimer's. Studies are getting more complex. The good news is there are more studies because of it. The bad news is it's going to be harder to find qualified patients. So you need numbers, right? Like if I were starting all over again, I wouldn't even consider not starting a research clinic without a private practice that my PI has and he or she is involved with. So there's just no way I would take on a PI with no private practice if I didn't have a way to get patients either from my sub-investigator's private practice. Somebody would have to have a private practice for me to feel comfortable and confident to start that clinic, right? So back in 2005 when I started, it was a little easier. You can just run some ads in the newspaper and get a good amount of patients because studies were simpler. Nowadays, that's not the case. You need large numbers of patients for this. So private practice database mining, have the PI and private practice staff work out a research referral process. So this is kind of like whatever the private practice's SOP is on this is what you need to be doing. So if the private practice SOP is only direct employees of the physician have access to the database and you don't happen to be that, then you need to have one of their employees actually be the one going through the database and then letting you know, hey, these are patients that might be interested. Every clinic's different. At one of my clinics, the practice, they were very strict actually, and their practice was not only could their staff not refer their patients to me and we were in the same office, they had to actually call the patient and ask if the patient is interested in research. I couldn't do that because I was technically not an employee of that doctor. So the receptionist, the front desk staff actually had to do that. And only when the patient said, yes, I'd be interested in someone contacting me, then I could get that patient's number, right? So, and they were playing by the rules. That was a strict private practice, and it was actually a pretty big private practice, but you may encounter that. And so if you do, the research director, the research coordinator, whatever you call yourself, the site owner, you're going to have to make sure that those receptionists, that those front desk people, or whomever the PI has delegated with this task of mining their database, you need to make sure that they do it, because there's no incentive for them to do more work without getting anything in return. So you got to figure out a way to compensate them for their time, give them some kind of incentive. So what I would do is give a $20 pre-screening fee to any patient that they got through the database that they said is a potential lead. Okay, and that's something I was willing to pay because for every 4 that I would get, 2 of them would be decent enough for me to screen. So that was 4 times 20, $80, right? And I'd get 2 patients coming in to get screened. So whatever the process is at that clinic, just make sure you follow it. This is especially going to be the case when you are sharing the office of the PI. So you're the research clinic and you're just sort of borrowing some space from them. And yes, you've partnered with the PI, but the rest of the staff could care less. Matter of fact, there might be a lot of resentment, a lot of animosity because who is this new person coming in here telling me how to do my job, giving me more work? You know, so you're going to have to find a way to get on the same page with these people and make sure that they have every incentive to work with you. So basically have some empathy, get to know them, and ask nicely, okay? Follow the process. If they allow you to have direct access, do whatever training you need to do to get that, because then you don't have to rely on other people. You can just do the database mining yourself. At one of the clinics where I'm in right now, one of the staff members was able to do that, and this is a big private practice that they have in this building, and they were able to actually have direct access to the database because they did some training, and now they're considered part of the PI's actual staff. So every private practice is different. There's no cookie cutter approach. Just figure out a way to make it work and get patients enrolled in your studies. Same thing with nurses and other clinicians on staff. So if you have a bigger private practice, it's not just going to be your PI. It's going to be your PI and then everyone else. And your PI may be the boss, may be the head honcho, but then there's other people in the way, right? So there's other doctors, and those doctors may not want their patients to get involved in research studies. So then how do you get them on board? Well, you make them sub-investigators, or you figure out a way for them to want to be involved with you. So it's art and science, and you got to figure it out, and every clinic has its own culture. Every private practice has its own dynamics. You just got to figure it out so that you can have a successful recruitment campaign when you start your study. Okay, so referring physicians. Now these are physicians that are not in the private practice of the PI, so they're colleagues of the PI. Perfect example is one of my other clinics. One of my other clinics in San Bernardino, actually, the neurologist there, she had us go reach out to a colleague of hers because we had a Parkinson's study. And our neurologist worked with another neurologist at a different office. I think it was like 7 miles away in a different city. So we go there. Okay, first of all, our PI really is nothing at that clinic, right? They're just a colleague. So we have to get past the gatekeepers. And yes, we were sent by someone that the gatekeeper knows, but typically we would go in there and bring cookies or bring coffee or bring sandwiches or bring something to get us in the office. So out of the waiting room, in the office, waiting for the physician so that we can have 5, 10, 15 minutes of their time. And then we got to be prepared. We got to have our pitch down, okay? What study are we enrolling for? What's the inclusion-exclusion criteria? What are we needing that physician to do? Do we need them to be a sub-investigator? Or are they just referring? Do they want to be a sub-investigator? Or do they prefer not to, but they prefer to receive some kind of compensation or some type of consulting fee or some type of pre-screening fee for going through the process? Or maybe they have to pay their staff extra for going through and mining their database. Whatever needs to be done, you figure out what they want, and then you try to find a way to have that be synergistically lined up with what you need, which is patients at your office, right? And so approach them to discuss interest in being sub-investigators, talk about compensation strategies. Hey, as a sub-I, we can actually pay you more. And oh, by the way, if you end up doing this assessment and this assessment, we can pay this much more per visit. If you don't want to do that, we can pay you a consulting fee or a pre-screening fee or whatever. We can reimburse you for your staff's time for doing the database mining. Figure out what they want, okay? Everyone wants something different. Figure out what they want. Try to educate them about research. Many are still super naive when it comes to understanding clinical research, so you got to just explain how this all works to them and figure out a way to get patients in your door. So specialists, what assessments can they do? This is especially true when you are working with a family practice physician or a general medicine or an internal medicine physician, and you need a specialist. So I have a site in Maryland. We have a general medicine physician. Well, we have an OBGYN study, and there's a certain assessment. There's actually 2 or 3 assessments where the sponsor requires that a OBGYN actually does those assessments. So now you need a sub-investigator that's a specialist, right? But they're okay with that because they typically will earn more. They'll either earn a percentage of the overall budget, or they'll earn a fee for doing that particular assessment plus any other fee from having the patients sent over. So logistics, okay? If you're going to an outside physician for referrals, they're going to be concerned about, well, are you going to steal my patients? So first you got to alleviate that objection right away. You got to handle that objection. No, we're not interested in treating your patients. We're just interested in the data collected from the study. As a matter of fact, you can continue treating your patients as you want. We don't want to even interrupt that. We're just doing something extra in addition to what you're already doing. The only thing is they have to come to our office, or maybe not. So if they're willing to have their location be listed on the 1572 as an additional facility, and the sponsor is okay with that, then that is something that you can do and work out as well. And that solves some of the logistic issues of where is the patient going to be seen. But if they don't want that or don't have the space for that but are willing to come to your clinic, well, how are you going to get the patients to your clinic? So either have a dedicated driver. Uber works just fine. Be careful about Uber. Sometimes there's some liability issues when it comes to some of the special population out there, particularly when it comes to mental illness. So you want to be careful, but there are specialized transportation companies for things like this. I know here in California, every county has their own access bus, but just figure out the logistics. Okay, we still use Uber at many of our clinics, and never been any issues, but I know sometimes there could be. So pay attention to the logistics of getting the patients from point A to point B. So now we go to advertising. Okay, so there's two types of advertising. There's traditional media, and then there's online digital media. So the traditional media is TV, radio, newspaper, and then you get all these advertising costs from your budget. So in week 6, we learned about contracts and budgets from Chris. Chris actually teaches this week. So get the advertising cost from week 6, have that pay for your traditional and your online, and I'm going to teach you how to do the digital ads in the next couple of slides. So from traditional media, TV, radio, newspaper, well, TV is the most expensive, radio is the second most, newspaper is the third most expensive. They all work. There's specialized vendors for each of these. Although you can do it yourself, I don't recommend it. If you're looking for TV or radio, I suggest this guy, and I have no affiliation with him. I just met him at some conferences. He's called the Patient Advertising Guru, and no relation to the Clinical Trials Guru, but he's been doing this for quite some time. There's also other clinics that have found their own vendors that they say pretty much fills up their entire patient funnel for certain studies. So the traditional media vendors, the specialized vendors are out there. You could negotiate your own TV rates and radio rates and newspaper rates, but if you can find someone to do that for you, and if you need referrals, just email me, dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com, and I will send you a few contacts. Okay, so for the traditional media, you do need IRB approval. So you do need, if you're using a central IRB, or if you're using a local IRB, which most of you will not be, but you will need IRB approval because these are direct ads. There's no way around it. Like, you're not building your brand like we're going to talk about in the next couple of slides, where you can actually build your brand and get around the IRB approval, because you're not really recruiting, you're not advertising for any study, you're just talking about medical conditions. Well, in this case, in the traditional media case, you do need IRB approval. So typically, most sponsors and CROs for studies like this, they will actually have their own pre-approved TV ads, radio ads, newspaper ads. Oftentimes they have them in different languages. So all you need to do is reach out to the sponsor or CRO and say, hey, I need this ad, the IRB approved ad, for radio, and I plan to use this. Or sometimes they'll say, well, we don't have one, but give us your script and we will get it approved. So then you give them a script, you just figure out what you're going to say, and the vendors from the TV and radio stations are going to help you create that. But get the IRB approval. Same thing with the newspaper approvals. If you need help with this, again, email me, dan@theclinicaltrialsguru.com. I have an entire team of people that do this all day long, so we can give you guys some good advice and get all these covered from the budget. Okay, week 6. Again, Chris Sauber spends an entire module on this, entire hour or more, talking about contracts and budgets and how to get the advertising cost in your budget to actually pay for the TV, radio, newspaper ads. So it's your money, use it or lose it when it comes to advertising. Now, another thing I want to add that I don't have a slide for is sometimes the sponsors and CROs, they actually are going to run their own central ad campaign. So what they'll do, if they have a nationwide study, they'll roll out a central ad, right? They'll get it IRB approved, they use a vendor, they run it in every market where they have a clinic, and then based on the responses they get, when the ad comes in, the leads that come in, they'll pre-screen them, and then they'll send you, the site, the qualified leads. And that doesn't always happen, happens like 20% of the time, but those are great because it's basically free money for you, the research clinic. Like, you didn't spend a dime on an ad. All you did was respond to a lead that you got from the sponsor. They already did a semi-decent job. Some of them do better job than others. of approving or qualifying the leads. So then you have your study coordinator reach out to them. And these ads, these leads that come in from ads, whether they're from your own campaign or a central campaign, whoever's responding to them, I think it should be you, the site owner, at least initially, until you have someone specifically responsible for this, like a study coordinator. Reach out to them the next day, the same day, because if you let these leads sit in your inbox for a week or 2 weeks, more than that, oftentimes these patients are going to forget that they even did that, because some of these responses to ads are just impulse responses. So they might forget if you wait a week, but if you do it the same day, right, then they call you or you call them, then they're more likely to remember what the study's all about. And first of all, they might remember that they actually did fill out an inquiry into the study. So that's traditional advertising. Now we get to the online digital media advertising. This is where the lines start to blur when it comes to IRB approval. In my opinion, and with a lot of experts that I've discussed this with, an ad needs IRB approval. A blog post talking about a particular medical condition does not. So on this slide, it's all about advertising. Okay, and advertising, all of this, whether it's online or offline, like the slide previously, you're going to need IRB approval. So there's different online digital media. There's Google ads, there's Facebook ads, and there's Craigslist ads. What you could do, just to play it safe, is take the pre-approved script from the radio or the TV ad or the newspaper ad, and just use that same script online. So you can run a Google ad with a landing page that's already been IRB approved. You're good to go. Same, or you can get more creative, and you can, instead of using that script on the actual TV ad, you can take a camera, right, and start recording yourself reading the IRB approved script. You can now put that on YouTube. You can now put that on Facebook and boost it, right? And if you need help doing this, reach out to me and I can give you some specifics on how to promote a Facebook post through an ad, through a boosted post. Okay, and then same thing with Craigslist. So you can take the script and then you can do the same thing with the audio script, alright? It's, as a matter of fact, pretty much the same thing. So you can read the script, it's already been IRB approved. So that's one way to go around it. I do recommend Facebook. They are cheaper. A lot of the times it does depend on the demographic. Who are you targeting? So obviously if you're targeting patients with Alzheimer's, you're actually targeting their family and their caregivers and not the patients themselves. On Google, same thing, but if you're targeting hypertension or asthma, you can go direct to the patient themselves. A lot of it depends on the particular medical condition. But this is where I'm going to get into the long-term branding. And by the way, there's so many vendors out there that can help you set up a Google campaign, help you set up a Facebook campaign, help you set up a Craigslist campaign. My company can actually do this for you through dansfair.com. So let me know if you need help doing this, and we can create some campaigns for you. All right, now long-term branding. This is where, in my opinion, now you'll have some IRBs disagree with me, but when I ask them why, they don't know what to say. So when in doubt, check with your own IRB, especially if you have a local IRB, but if you have a central IRB, check with them as well. Long-term branding. So you are a media company. If you can understand that from the beginning, everything's going to be a lot easier for you. So again, this entire part I'm about to get into, this entire slide, long-term branding, is really long-term. So don't expect to see any results from it right away, but if you're consistent over time, it actually might even replace your PI's database as the #1 way to get patient referrals for your studies. Now, think of yourself as a media company. Promote your therapeutic indications. What I do at one of my clinics here, Global Clinical Trials in Irvine, we actually are getting a lot of Alzheimer's studies. So my PI, once a month, I have a videographer come in. We actually do this like professionally. It's not just me going with my cell phone, but we actually have a videographer come in. We sit the PI down for 15 minutes. We interview them. They edit. They put some B-roll in there. They make it look artistic. And then they put it on YouTube and on Vimeo, and then we run Facebook ads behind it, and we'll convert it into a written article. All we're doing is building our brand. So when we do these videos about Alzheimer's, we want people with Alzheimer's, and when we run the ads, we only target people within a 50-mile radius of our clinic. Now, if you have more than one clinic, you can do this at different places. But we only do this within a 50-mile radius of our clinic, and we're trying to build our blog to be a trusted resource for family members of people with Alzheimer's, or caregivers of people with Alzheimer's, or spouses of people with Alzheimer's, or sometimes if they're mild enough, people with Alzheimer's themselves. So we're not trying to get anything out of that. We're just trying to build our brand, and over time, right, like 3 months, 6 months, 12 months, if we're consistent with it, and we've been doing this for about 3 months, and we actually got some leads. Okay, so it's just a matter of continuing to do this. So promote your therapeutic indications. You don't need IRB approval for this because you're not talking about any particular study. As a matter of fact, we started this Alzheimer's campaign before we even got an Alzheimer's study at this clinic, just because we knew it was an area of interest for a lot of people in this area, right, in Orange County, and probably no different anywhere else in the country. So build up your brand for your medical conditions you specialize in, and then run Facebook and Google ads for those pieces of content. So promote the pieces of content. Facebook works great for this, just in your area, so that you can target potential leads who may one day want to come to your clinic and discuss clinical research. So build up your brand, whether you're asthma, irritable bowel syndrome, whatever the case may be. You'll know because you know what your PI sees the most of, and therefore you'll know what kind of studies you're probably going to do best at, or what kind of studies you can get on the market. Like we knew with Alzheimer's, we didn't have Alzheimer's studies at the time, but we knew we were going to get a bunch. So we started this early. We started these branding campaigns early. So if you know you're about to get a bunch of OBGYN studies, have one of your doctors or your nurses or somebody who, like an expert clinician or just people from the community, which we're going to get into in the next slide, discuss that condition, and then what people with that condition can do, and then you slowly introduce them to the idea of clinical research. But you're going to have your blog on your page, like on your website, so yourresearchclinic.com. It's going to have home, about us, our capabilities, our staff, all that stuff, and then you're going to have a blog, right? And the blog is where eventually you're going to get organic traffic. And what I mean by organic traffic is when people are at home searching on Google for your medical condition, or clinics that specialize in their medical condition, hopefully your content is ranked high enough, and the only way it's ranked high enough is if you're consistently pushing out content that is good content, that is valuable content, or that Google deems as valuable. And then you're going to get free referrals, right, from people searching online. So that's why I said eventually this can become an even bigger referral source of patients than your PI's private practice. But most people give up way too soon because they don't see any results. I mean, you may go 12 months before you see your first lead. But if you're planning on having this clinic for 10 years or longer, it's well worth it to invest 12 months of your time, because you're getting patient referrals from your PI's database anyways. I just want you to spend 5% of your time, 3% of your time building out long-term branding. Hire an intern to do this stuff for you. Hire me to do this for you. Have a digital agency. We charge $500 a month to help sites all over the country do this. So you can go to dansferrer.com for that. So invest in yourself, invest in your company's brand. Over time, you will eventually, if you're good and you're consistent and you're actually providing value, you will get a lot in return, okay? But you just got to be consistent with it. So build up your brand for the medical conditions you specialize in. And then there's 3 types of content you can create: video, audio or written. If you can, do all three. If you're camera shy, don't do videos. If you hate writing, don't do written posts. If you hate the sound of your voice, don't do audio or have someone else do it for you. Figure that out. I would prefer you do all three and you find people who are comfortable with each type of content. Or you just choose one that you know you're going to be compliant with and just do that. So the goal of this is to build long-term brand, to capture emails, so when they come, when they find your page from an organic search result or from a Facebook ad or from a Google ad or from a Twitter ad or from any other type of ad or search engine or social network, you'll have a capture email box. It wouldn't hurt to give them something in return, like, hey, get a free ebook on this condition if you sign up. Get their phone number, and again, this usually does not require IRB approval because these are not ads. Okay, this is building up your brand. So next slide. So community patient advocacy groups. So every community has different associations, different patient advocacy groups. I'm going to talk about Alzheimer's again because it's one of the ones that we're most familiar with. But there's the Alzheimer's Association. Okay. There's also NAMI, the National Alliance for Mental Illness. There's a patient advocacy group for almost every therapeutic indication. So everywhere, every therapeutic indication has a local chapter in most major metro areas. If you're in the outskirts of a major metro area, or not even a major metro area, just a metro area, you can join the closest one to you. So you go there, you meet with the people, you figure out what kind of programs they have. Most of them are already familiar with clinical research because they're approached by sponsors all the time to run central campaigns. Like here in Orange County, the Alzheimer's Association, we go there and we talk about our Alzheimer's studies. These guys are like experts at Alzheimer's studies because they talk clinical research with pharma companies almost every month, and they have hundreds of programs for their patients, and some of which your site can be a sponsor for. So you can either sponsor an event, you can sponsor a support group, you can sponsor a work session, talk to them, figure out what you get for that. And here's the most important thing out of all of this. Here's the key to all of this. You can have the sponsor pay for this if you negotiated in your contract and budget a healthy advertising budget. So for many of these things, depending on the market you're in, to sponsor a 3-month support group for Alzheimer's, maybe like $5,000 for the entire 3 months. In some markets, it might be $2,000. In some, you may be doing something else. Your information might be put in their newsletter. Something about your study, again, get that IRB approved, will be put in their email list. Whatever the case may be, figure out what it is, get it approved by the sponsor, and then the sponsor can pay for this. So you don't even need to pay for it. You will pay for it up front, but then the sponsor will reimburse you. So this is why that week 6 module is so important when we talk about contracts and budgets. Finally, patient referrals. So encourage your patients. First of all, treat your patients good. Okay. So if you treat them well, they're going to refer their friends anyways. If they ask for a referral fee, you got to figure out, talk to your PI, because it's ultimately the responsibility of the PI to figure out those kind of things. Talk to your IRB, or just figure out something that is legal. Get an attorney involved if you have to. But set up some kind of program where you incentivize patients to refer their friends, family member, etc. to your research clinic. So find a way to encourage your patients to refer. I know a lot of sites across the country, they get really creative at doing this. They have raffles, they give away iPhones, they give away all kinds of stuff. So encourage your patients to refer. When in doubt, seek legal counsel if you want to talk about the legal and regulatory implications of this. And as always, if you need help with any strategies, reach out to me at any time, Dan at theclinicaltrialsguru.com. Take care.